الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ما بعد. Alhamdulillah, by the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have got to hadith number 6 in the Arba'in of Al-Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayh. There was one clarification I wanted to make from the last dars we spoke on, the last hadith. First and foremost, the topic of bid'ah is a very deep and amiq topic. It's very hard to cover everything in short periods of time. So there were some things I missed. One of the things I missed, I just wanted to add right now. This is very important to remember. Very, very important. And bid'ah, innovations, will only be considered if someone brings it into the fold of Islam in acts of worship, in ibadat. Okay? In ibadat. If it's outside the realm and the fold of ibadat and acts of worship, this will not be considered an innovation in Islam. It will be an innovation literally, right? But it will not be bid'atul shari or al-bid'atul haqiqi, like the bid'ah Islam speaks about. It only has to do with acts of worship and us thinking whether something we innovate is an act of worship or not. طيب? So I'll give you guys a quick example. So brother asked a question last week as well about gathering for adhkar and for dhikr. Gathering once a week, or let's say once a month for dhikr. So this is the thing. If we think that gathering at this specific time, this time we're gathering, has something to do with acts of worship and ibadat, and this is something that the Prophet ﷺ did, this will be considered a bid'ah, and it will be incorrect to do this. But for organization purposes, like for example, the curriculum that is being taught in these universities, Islamic universities and madrasas around the world, this curriculum didn't exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right? This was a means of organization. This was a means of organizing an organization. Like so, if this is our intention with these types of things, it will not be considered a bid'ah. But if our intention is that this is an actual act of worship and this time is something very sacred or whatever it is, then it will be considered a bid'ah. So remember, acts of worship, ibadat. Outside the fold of ibadat, it will not be considered a bid'atul haqiqi, a literal bid'ah that Islam speaks about. So I hope that clarifies. So inshallah, now we will dive right into the next hadith. Al-Hadith al-Sadis. عن أبي عبد الله النعمان بن بشير رضي الله عنهما قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس فمن اتقى الشبهات فقد استبرأ لدينه وعرضه ومن وقع في الشبهات وقع في الحرام كالراعي يرعى حول الحمى يوشك أن يرتع فيه ألا وإن لكل مالك حمى ألا وإن حمى الله محارمه ألا وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب رواه البخاري ومسلم. Nu'man ibn Bashir radiyallahu anhu said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saying, indeed halal is very clear. And indeed, haram is very, very clear. And between the two are doubtful, unclear matters that many of the people do not have knowledge of. So whoever abstains from the doubtful matters has saved his religion and his honor, and whoever falls into the doubtful matters falls into haram. Just as the shepherd who pastures around an area is likely to indulge freely grazing in that area. Truly, every king has a sanctuary, and Allah's sanctuary is His prohibitions. Verily, in the body, there is a piece of flesh. If that piece of flesh is correct, then the whole of the body will be correct. And if it is corrupt, then the whole body will be corrupt. Indeed, listen carefully, this piece of flesh is the heart. This hadith has been narrated in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So, as we can tell from the meaning in the translation of the hadith, this hadith covers a number of different topics. And inshallah ta'ala, we will get into every single one of them in due time. So this hadith has been narrated by An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, the Sahabi. However, Nu'man ibn Bashir radiallahu anhu, he was not the only Sahabi to narrate this hadith. This hadith has also been narrated by Ali radiallahu anhu, Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Jabir ibn Abdullah, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, and Ammar ibn Yasir. So the reason why I'm mentioning these Sahaba to you, those who also narrated this hadith, it's gonna explain a point I'm gonna make later on. So this hadith has been narrated by a numerous amount of Sahaba. So like we normally do, we like to dive into the chain before we get into the actual text of the hadith. There are 5 narrators in this hadith. 5 narrators from between Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim to An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, including all of them, there are 5. This hadith has also been narrated in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, the Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, the Sunan of Imam Darimi, Ibn Majah, and the Sunan of Al-Imam Bayhaqi. So this narration, this hadith has been narrated in many, many different places in many books, sometimes with small differences in wording, but all have the same general meaning. So now we will begin to look at the sanad, inshallah. So I chose to speak about the tabi'i and the sahabi narrating this hadith, the final 2 narrators in the chain before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the tabi'i narrating this hadith from An-Nu'man ibn Bashir is the one and only Al-Imam Al-Sha'bi. And Al-Imam Al-Sha'bi, rahmatullahi alayhi, was a great Imam of this Ummah. So his name, obviously Sha'bi is his laqab. His name is Amir ibn Shurahbil. Amir was his name and Shurahbil was his father's name. But some people say that his father's name was Abdullah. There's a small difference in opinion. Some say his father's name was Shurahbil, others say his father's name was Abdullah. He was an imam, a great imam of hadith, a great imam of fiqh. He was also known as Al-Allama. And Allama comes from the word ilm. So Allama is a ismul mubalagha. It's when you're giving an exaggerative meaning to that noun. So an Allama is a person who has a great amount of ilm. An Allama is a person who has a great amount of ilm. His son's name was Amr, so he was also known as Abu Amr, his kunya. He was from Hamdan, so he was known as Al-Hamdani. And he migrated to Kufa at the end of his life. This is why he was known as Al-Kufi as well. Al-Hamdani, Al-Kufi. So there's an ikhtilaf to when he was born. I mean, some ulama say he was born around the year 20 after Hijrah, between 20 and 30. Some ulama say 22, some say 21, some even say 28, some say 32. So there's a small difference in opinion to when he was born. But what is known is that he was born Ibn Sa'd, rahmatullahi alayhi, who was one of the Muhammad ibn Sa'd. He's one of the most famous historians in Islam. He wrote his famous book At-Tabaqat, which is a reference point in history. So he says that he was born in Himyar. Himyar is an area in today's day and age where Yemen is, in that area where Yemen is and those Gulf countries. And then he went to Hamdan when he was a child. His family moved to the city of, or the province of Hamdan. And Hamdan, as we can guess, is in modern day Iran. Modern day Iran. It is quite close to the province of Tehran as well. SubhanAllah, a lot of these ulama, they're from that area. How many times have we quoted Iran being a place of birth or a place of a place of origin for these great ulama of the past? Al-Imam al-Sha'bi rahmatullahi alayhi is one of them as well. So Imam Dhahabi rahmatullahi alayhi, he mentions that Imam Sha'bi, he saw Ali radiallahu anhu, and he even prayed salah behind him. He prayed salah behind Ali radiallahu anhu. And Imam Dhahabi in his Siyaru A'lam al-Nubala, he mentions about 50 different Sahaba that Al-Imam Sha'bi met. And other ulama say that he met up to 500 Sahaba. And he narrated a hadith from 500 different Sahaba. So this makes him an automatic tabi'i, obviously. So when I was going through the Siyaru A'lam al-Nubala, the book of Al-Imam Dhahabi, there were so many quotes of praise for Al-Imam al-Sha'bi, not only from people after him, but from his contemporaries, from people who were actually considered to be greater than him in ilm and in knowledge. So some of these quotes, so Abu Mijlaz, who is a famous narrator of hadith, he says, ما رأيت أحدا أفقه من الشعبي إلا سعيد بن المسيب ولا طاووس ولا عطاء ولا الحسن ولا ابن سيرين فقد رأيت كلهم. So Abu Mijlaz, he says, I have never seen anybody who was more, you can say, great or more skillful and proficient in fiqh than Imam al-Sha'bi. Except, then he mentioned a few people who he considered greater than Imam Sha'bi. And these people he mentions are a'lam. They're people who are up there. The first he mentions Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib. And Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, he is known as Sayyid al-Tabi'een. This was his name in all the books. They know him as Sayyid al-Tabi'een, the leader of the Tabi'een. So he says that Sa'id al-Musayyib is one of those people who had more knowledge in fiqh than Imam Sha'bi. Then he mentions Wala Ata, and Ata ibn Abi Rabah. And Ata ibn Abi Rabah, who was the Mufti of Mecca, who was a direct student of one of the Abadilah. A lot of the kings used to come to him, a lot of the khulafa used to come to him for questions, seeking his guidance. A great master in fiqh. So he was also greater than him in fiqh, Abu Mijlas says. Wal al-Hasan. Al-Hasan refers to Al-Hasan al-Basri. And everyone knows who Al-Hasan al-Basri rahmatullahi alayhi is. He is one of the greatest tabi'een. He is also greater than Imam Sha'bi in fiqh. And he also mentions Ibn Sirin. Muhammad ibn Sirin, the great famous mu'abbir, the interpreter of dreams. There's a book actually that's translated, it's in English now. It's called, it's something to do with the interpretation of dreams. Anyways, it's quoted to, and it goes to Imam Ibn Sirin rahmatullahi alayhi, who was known for his great ability to interpret dreams. So what this book does, it brings different things that people see in dreams, and it gives so-called, you can say, answers to what these things mean, that could mean in your life and so forth. So this is khair inshallah, but the thing is, this ilm is not something definite. It's not an ilm that you can just go to somebody and learn. Okay? Ilm al-ta'bir is not an ilm where you can go to a person and just attain from him. It's a really, really deep science that takes a lot of taqwa and piety. It's not something aam where you can go into a book and just interpret your own dreams. So what our teachers used to tell us, don't depend and rely on these books. Because Allahu A'lam, we don't know. But I know a lot of people that they tend to use this book as a reference point. So, and then Abu Mijlaz rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that فَقَدْ رَأَيْتُ كُلَّهُمْ, I have seen every single one of these great men. And the only people greater than Imam Sha'bi were these people mentioned right here. And then Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahmatullahi alayhi, who we spoke about, I believe, in the first or second hadith. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, who is a very famous narrator in hadith. All the books of hadith take hadith from him. So he's a hujjah when it comes to hadith. He said, عُلَمَاءُ النَّاسِ ثَلَاثَةً. The scholars of the people fall into three different categories. Meaning there are three scholars who the people could always go to, and these scholars always had the answers for their questions. They were very, you can say, approachable. People would always go to them and ask them questions. So he says, Abdullah ibn Abbas fi zamanihi. So Abdullah ibn Abbas, one of the great abadila, he was always receiving questions from people and always answering. A great alim of the tabi'een, of the Sahaba. Then he goes, Al-Imam Sha'abi fi zamanihi aydan. Imam Sha'abi is also one of these people who people used to always come to and ask questions. And then he mentions also Sufyan al-Thawri fi zamanihi. And Sufyan al-Thawri as well, a great alim in his right. People would always come to him and ask him masail, and he would always on the spot answer it. These people were just great ulama'un nas. And this is something that a lot of people who have some knowledge can take lesson from. Be very approachable to people. Don't limit yourself and keep yourself away from people. Be there for people whenever they have a masala, whenever they have a question, whenever they have an issue, whatever field you're in. This isn't only specific to ulama. This is also specific and to different fields and sciences. Be open to answer people's questions if you're able to at that time. So another really great ajib thing that Ibn Sirin rahmatullahi alayhi mentions about al-Imam Sha'abi, and when I read this, I was blown away. He said, "Qadimtu al-Kufa." He said, I came to Kufa one time. I was traveling. I came to Kufa. وَلِلشَّعَبِ حَلْقَةٌ عَظِيمَةٌ. I came. I saw Imam Sha'abi. He had a huge gathering, a halqa. He had a huge halqa. And one point I want to make before I continue the quote: a lot of people, they in today's day and age, for the word gathering, they use halaqa. We hear this a lot, halaqa. However, this is grammatically incorrect. Halaqa refers to those circular doorknobs on doors. You know those doorknobs where you grab and you bang the door with? This is what a halaqa is. Halqa with a sakin on the lam refers to an Islamic gathering, refers to a circle of gathering. Okay, so it's not halaqa, it's halqa. And the reason why I know this is because my teacher he corrected me, he bashed me for this once. Okay, so he says, وَلِلشَّعَبِ حَلْقَةٌ عَظِيمَةٌ. Imam Sha'abi had a huge gathering. And Ibn Sirin rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, وَالصَّحَابَةُ يَوْمَئِذٍ كَثِيرٌ. And he said, in this gathering of Imam Sha'abi, there were many Sahaba. There were many Sahaba in this gathering. Even though Imam al-Sha'abi rahmatullahi alayhi was a tabi'i, yet Sahaba were sitting in his gathering benefiting from him. This goes to show the stature of Al-Imam Sha'abi, what kind of person he was. The Sahaba used to come and sit in his gathering. And one time, a few of Imam Sha'abi's students, they asked him, they said, how do you have so much ilm and so much knowledge? Give us some advice. And this knowledge, this advice he gave is beautiful, and it's something that we can all learn from. He says, بِنَفْيِ الْإِعْتِمَادِ وَالسَّيْرِ فِي الْبِلَادِ وَصَبْرٍ كَصَبْرِ الْحِمَارِ وَبُكُورٍ كَبُكُورِ الْغُرَابِ. He says, the way I, Imam Sha'abi is speaking, the way I, got this knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was from a few different things. The first thing, بِنَفْيِ الْإِعْتِمَادِ. I did not rely on anybody to motivate me. I was self-motivated. I didn't need my teacher to sit me down and give me targheeb and motivate me. Oh, if you do this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. I was self-motivated. I knew what the goal was, and I had the free will to push myself and achieve. Self-motivated. This is something very important. The second thing he said was sayr fil bilad. I traveled. I went all around to different ulama around the world. As we see, he was born in Himyar. He was born in Yemen, and he passed away in Kufa. And his family migrated to Hamdan. He was all around. Was sayr fil bilad. Travel. The third thing he said was sabrin ka sabr al-himar. And he said, I had patience like how donkeys have patience. What does he mean by that? So he's doing the tashbih to a donkey. Why? Because we see back home how much donkeys are beat, how much they're kicked, and how much they're hit. What do these donkeys do? They don't do anything. They just continue to give that monotone face. They don't move whatsoever. So he said, I was patient like how a donkey is patient. I always had patience. I was always steadfast. Patience. The fourth advice he gave, وَبُكُورٍ كَبُكُورِ الْغُرَابِ. I woke up early every single morning, like how the crows used to wake up in the morning. I used to wake up very early. I used to begin my day very, very early. That is why, and especially when it comes to learning and ta'aleem and learning and gaining ilm, whatever type of ilm it is, it's mentioned that you should always start you can say your memorization process or your learning of this ilm after Fajr, because your mind is the freshest. I remember when we were memorizing in our madrasa, our teachers used to always tell us that the best time to memorize the Quran is after Fajr. So they used to always encourage us to stay, because we used to pray Fajr and then we used to go to sleep. This was what our routine was. When Fajr was really, really early, we used to pray Fajr and go to sleep. However, sometimes students would stay up during this time because of the advice that our teacher used to give. And I've actually firsthand experienced how blessed this time is, how sacred this time is, and how fresh your mind is. Your mind at that time is like a sponge. It just takes in, it takes in. And I'm speaking firsthand that this is the best time for anything, whether you want to read a book, whether you want to learn something, memorize, this is the best time. So these four advices he gave his students. And something else that I want to make mention of, Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi, he mentions a narration in his Sahih. And it goes perfect to how Imam Sha'abi lived his life. He said, لا يستطاع العلم براحة الجسم. He said, ilm, knowledge, will never be attained by ease of the body, by your body being very comfortable and easy, by your body being at ease. Ilm will not be attained by this. The more effort and the more hard work you put and show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more He will give this ilm to you. That is why you see some of these ulama, the conditions they lived in are the things they went through for this ilm. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to them. Why? Because this ilm is not a type of knowledge that you read and it just stays in your mind. La. This ilm, as Imam Shafi'i says, it's a type of nur. It's a type of nur, and nur is only taken inside the heart. And that nur is only given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside the heart. So when you show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you are exerting yourself, pushing yourself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fill that heart with the nur of ilm. And these ulama were all examples of that, subhanAllah. Indeed, he was a giant of this ummah. He passed away in the year 103 after Hijrah. So this was Al-Imam Al-Sha'abi, Amir ibn Shurahbil. Now we get to the Sahabi narrating this hadith. Al-Nu'man ibn Bashir. So, huwa al-Amir. And I'll explain every single one of these terms. He was an Amir. He was an alim. Sahib al-Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was a Sahabi. Wabnu sahibihi. He was also the son of Sahaba. Both his parents, they were Sahaba as well. Abu Abdullah, ويقال Abu Muhammad. So he had two kids, Abdullah and Muhammad. Al-Ansari, he was an Ansari. Al-Khazraji. What does that mean? He was from the tribe of Khazraj, and he was from the Ansar of Medina. Okay. And he was the nephew of the famous Sahabi Abdullah ibn Rawaha. Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he was that Sahabi who Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam made him one of the generals in the Battle of Mu'tah. Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he was made as a general at this battle, at the Battle of Mu'tah. So, and Nu'man ibn Bashir was Abdullah ibn Rawaha's nephew. So, he was, subhanAllah, one very, very interesting, you can say, thing that Nu'man ibn Bashir was given, an honor he was given. He was the first to be born from the Ansar after the hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam made the hijrah from Mecca to Medina, He was the first baby born after the Prophet ﷺ's hijrah. An-Nu'man ibn Bashir. So amongst the Ansar, An-Nu'man ibn Bashir was the first to be born from the Ansar. And amongst the Muhajirin, the first to be born was Abdullah ibn Zubayr, the grandson of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So these two babies were the first to be born after the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nu'man ibn Bashir being from the Ansar, being from Medina, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr being from the Muhajirin. So this was one of the, you can say, the things that, the honors that Abdullah ibn Nu'man ibn Bashir radiallahu anhu was given. So he has narrated about 114 hadith. There are 114 ahadith narrated from An-Nu'man ibn Bashir. And Imam Bukhari narrates one of them, and Imam Muslim, rahmatullahi alayhima, narrates 4 of them. Okay, so the other 100 and some odd are scattered in the other books of hadith. So his father, his name was Bashir ibn Sa'd, his father took part in the Battle of Badr. His father was one of the Badriyun per se. As we know, the Battle of Badr was the first battle that the Muslims went through. So his father was one of those people who took part in this battle. So he was born, so like I said, he was born right when the Prophet ﷺ made that hijrah. Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi had the opinion that he was born in the first year of hijrah. Some other ulama say that he was born in the second year of hijrah. Okay, so Imam Bukhari says he was born that first year, right when the Prophet ﷺ migrated. Some other ulama say that no, it was the second year of hijrah. Okay, so now we get to the part where I said he was a Amir. So how was he an Amir? He was actually from the Umara and the ministers of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. When Muawiyah radiallahu anhu became the Khalifa, he appointed An-Nu'man ibn Bashir as one of the Amirs, as one of the, you can say, ministers. He was appointed first as the minister of Kufa. So he made Muawiyah radiallahu anhu made An-Nu'man ibn Bashir the leader or the minister of Kufa for some time. And then after that, he made Muawiyah radiallahu anhu made An-Nu'man ibn Bashir the Qadi of Damascus. He appointed him as the Qadi of Damascus. So he was from the Umara of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. And one very interesting thing to note, Simak ibn Harb rahmatullahi alayhi, he said that Nu'man ibn Bashir was one of the most eloquent spoken people he had ever seen in his life. He said he was so eloquent when he spoke that people's ears were just glued to him whenever he would speak. He had one of those types of voices, one of those types of lectures where people, they would always listen. And this is one of the reasons why Muawiyah radiallahu anhu made him one of his amirs. Because of his grasp of the Arabic language, he was also a great poet. And he was very, very articulate in how he spoke. So people were just glued to him every time he spoke. So one very interesting thing to note is that we mentioned that Nu'man ibn Bashir radiallahu anhu, he was born in either the first or second after Hijrah. Right? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he passed away in the 10th after Hijrah. So this makes him about 7, 8, 9 years old when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. So a question arises. How is it possible that this child is narrating hadith? Right? The question arises, how is it that this child is narrating hadith? So specifically with this hadith, as I mentioned in the beginning, how many other Sahaba are also narrating this hadith? Ali radiallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Jabir ibn Abdullah, Ammar ibn Yasir, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Imam Hassan radiallahu anhum. All of these Sahaba are also narrating this hadith. What does that tell us? That An-Nu'man ibn Bashir at a very young age, at that young age, was very, very intelligent. And his memory was very, very sharp. What are we doing right now? We're corroborating, right? We're seeing how Nu'man ibn Bashir narrated this hadith. We're questioning it because he was young, but we also see the other great Sahaba who also narrated this hadith. So this shows that Nu'man ibn Bashir could not have been lying, because other Sahaba also narrated this hadith. So what does this tell us? This tells us that ilm, there's no specific age for when this pursuit of ilm should begin. Based on the child, obviously, every situation is different. Every situation is different. We can see from the child sometimes if they're able to comprehend or not. And Nu'man ibn Bashir was one of them. And Imam Shafi'i, rahmatullahi alayhi, he memorized the Quran when he was 9 years old. It's very, very mashhur. 9 years old when he memorized the Quran. I have seen kids, I myself have seen kids who memorize the Quran at 10, 11 years old. So there is no age limit. If you see someone in your family, whether it's your child, whether it's your cousin, whatever it is, someone you see that they have this potential and they have the brains, encourage them. Encourage them to pursue this ilm. As we see here, Nu'man ibn Bashir at that young age was narrating hadith. Another thing to note is that Nu'man ibn Bashir, he used to also narrate many ahadith from other Sahaba as well, because of him being so young. So there's reports from him narrating hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha, narrating hadith from Umar radiallahu anhu, from Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma. So he used to narrate hadith from the Sahaba as well. So he was murdered and killed at the age of 65 after he gave bay'ah to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. So after the passing of Muawiyah, after the passing of Yazid, Abdullah ibn Zubayr became one of the khulafa after his time. So Nu'man ibn Bashir, he gave bay'ah, he pledged his allegiance to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. However, the people of Hims is an area in modern day Syria. The people of that area did not like how Nu'man ibn Bashir gave bay'ah to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. There was a lot of politics at that time. We spoke a little bit about it last time between Aisha radiallahu anha and Ali. There was a lot of politics. So what happened was these people, they murdered him because of him pledging his allegiance to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. So others say that he was actually killed in the village of Birin. He was driven out of Hims and he was killed in this city, in this village, Birin. Regardless, it's known and it's a fact that he was murdered by these people. Another thing to note is that we saw that he was one of the amirs, one of the umara of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. What does that tell us? That tells us that during the, you can say, the conflict between Muawiyah and Ali radiallahu anhuma, Nu'man ibn Bashir was one of those very few Sahaba from Medina who took the side of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Most took the side of Ali radiallahu anhu, but Nu'man ibn Bashir was one of those Sahaba who actually, one of those Sahabi who took the side of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. And again, this was political. We spoke about it last time. The whole thing, one of the biggest, you could say the issue, the thing that caused this conflict was the whole thing on the murder of Uthman radiallahu anhu. One group wanted to take their time in finding out who killed Uthman radiallahu anhu. The other group was very, they were just, blood was rushing to their brains. They wanted to find out as soon as possible who killed him. So this started a conflict. And the munafiqeen on both sides, they caused more of a fitna for these groups to clash. Anyways, so this was his political position. But this, one thing to note, this doesn't give us reason to go and now curse Nu'man ibn Bashir. Right? This is not from the aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah to curse any of the Sahaba. We don't have any justification to do that. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has praised them. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself has praised them. And when a hukum is aam, when something is mentioned aam and generally, we cannot go and make that takhsis and specification. Especially when the person or when the one making this general is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We are in no position to go and now point out this person is this, now this person. No, not at all. We take the hukum and ruling as general and am. This is the aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So this was a small breakdown of the sanad of the hadith. طيب, so now we're getting into the matan of the hadith. And this hadith has many, many topics. This hadith has many, many topics. It has to do with halal. It has to do with haram. It has to do with mutashabihat, those unclear things. And it also has to do with the heart. So as we can see, it's a very comprehensive hadith that has many different topics. So Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayh, he says, هذا الحديث مجمع على عظم موقعه وكثرة فواده he said أحد الإسلام يدور عليها الإسلام. So he says this hadith is a very, very important hadith where a lot of different matters are spoken about and a lot of different benefits are mentioned. And he says that this hadith is 1/3 of Islam. This hadith is 1/3 of Islam. If you guys remember what Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi said about إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, the first hadith in the Arba'in, he said that that was also 1/3 of Islam. So the second third of Islam, he said, is this hadith. So this hadith has a very, very grand status in Sharia. And Imam Abu Dawood as-Sijistani, and Imam Abu Dawood, who is the famous compiler of hadith, of his Sunan Abi Dawood, his name is Abu Dawood as-Sijistani. He says that this hadith is actually 1/4 of Islam. He doesn't say it's 1/3, he said it's 1/4. It's one of the 4 hadith that is very comprehensive and explains all the qawa'id and aspects of Islam. So this hadith, again, it's a lot of emphasis and a lot of importance has been given. So now, we will begin the hadith, insha'Allah ta'ala. So, this hadith is in 2 parts. This hadith is in 2 parts. The first part has to do with halal, haram, doubtful matters. Halal, haram, and doubtful matters. The second has to do with the heart and how, if the condition of the heart changes, the entire body changes. So now, we'll begin with the wording. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he starts the hadith and he says, Inna al-halal bayyinun. Inna is a noun that shows emphasis. Inna meaning indeed. Indeed. La shakka fihi bil yaqeen. Whenever we see inna in the Quran, this is what it means. Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Innahu ala kulli shay'in qadira. So innahu is for this. Inna, emphasis. Inna al-halal bayyin. Indeed, halal. Indeed, those things that are permissible, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it very, very clear. Halal is very, very clear. So now, what is halal? What does that mean? Ay, inna al-halal wadihun. Halal is very wadih and evident. We don't need to do too much research on the things that are halal. It's right in front of us. La yakhfa hadduhu. It's not hidden from us. The limits of halal are not hidden from us. So what does halal mean? Halal is anything Islam has permitted by a clear text proving it. Okay, Islam, so halal is anything Islam has permitted by a clear text. Okay? And now, these, you can say, aspects of halal, they have categories. Halal is now broken down to different categories. Okay, and these categories are based on the strength of the dalil, proving this halal action. Okay, what do I mean by that? I don't know if you guys remember, there was a few durus ago, we spoke about the difference between fard, the difference between wajib. So fard and wajib are aspects of halal. Something that's sunnah, something that's mustahab, something that's wajib, something that's fard. These are all in the realm of permissible and halal. So now what's the difference between a fard and a wajib? because halal, like I said, is broken down into categories. The difference between fard and wajib. Okay, so majority of the ulama, they say that there's no difference. Okay, they say that it has the exact same meaning. And everyone agrees to this, that literally it has the exact same meaning. However, according to the Hanafi fuqaha, there is a difference. So what the Hanafi fuqaha, what they say is that a fard action is something that has been proven by a qat'i dalil. Okay, a fard action, something fard, this is proven by a very decisive dalil. Okay, does anybody remember what qat'i dalail are? We spoke about this last time a bit. Quran is one of them, exactly. So a qat'i dalil, Quran, a little bit more specific. So look, as we know, there are different categorizations of hadith as well, right? There's sahih, there's hasan, there's da'if, there's mutawatir, there's mashhur. So a qat'i dalil, which is the strongest type of dalil in Islam. Number one, Quran. Number two is al-hadith al-mutawatir. Al-hadith al-mutawatir are those ahadith which a huge amount of narrators have narrated. Like over 100, 70, 80, a lot of narrators of different generations have narrated this hadith. Al-hadith al-mutawatir. The third type of qat'i dalil is al-hadith al-mashhur. Al-hadith al-mashhur is very similar to al-hadith al-mutawatir, except that the number is a little bit less. But point being is that al-hadith al-mashhur and al-hadith al-mutawatir, a great amount of narrators have narrated this hadith. So these three are types of qat'i dalil. Meaning when we see this dalil, when we see this proof, there are no, you can say, shortcuts around it. This is a very strong proof, okay? So the Hanafis say that a fard action is something that has been proven by a qat'i dalil. Okay? Now what's wajib? Wajib is something that has been proven by a dhanni dalil. What's a dhanni dalil? A dhanni dalil is anything other than these three dalail. Meaning a khabr al-wahid, a single hadith. Like a sahih hadith, for example. Or a hasan hadith, for example. Or 3-4 sahih hadith on one topic. This is something that is now dhanni. It's not something completely decisive like these other proofs. It is something less decisive. Okay, so now why do the Hanafi fuqaha make this categorization? What's the reason? No one else does this except the Hanafi fuqaha. What's the hikmah behind it? The reason is, the main reason why they did this is because it's to do with how a person looks at fard and wajib. Now, if a person goes and rejects something that has been proven by a qat'i dalil, meaning something that is fard, if a person rejects this, he will automatically come out of the fold of Islam. Okay? Now, however, if a person rejects and denies something that is wajib, something that has been proven by a dhanni dalil, we cannot say he's a kafir. This is the reason why the Hanafi fuqaha separated the two, for means of how people look at them. Because some people out there, just to save them from this aspect of takfir, right? This is why they made this categorization. Okay, so now, I hope that was clear, inshaAllah. So the next aspect, إِنَّ الْحَرَامَ بَيِّنٌ. Indeed, haram is also very clear. Meaning, لَا تُخْفَى حُرْمَتُهُ لِوَرَدِ النَّص. So haram is something that, it's hurma. Its hurma is not hidden. It being haram is not hidden. It's very, very clear by the texts we have. This is what haram is. Something very clear. So what is haram? The definition of haram is anything Islam has forbid. Anything Islam has forbid. Anything Islam has put a nahi on. Okay? And if done, there will be consequences. There will be a punishment or a consequence if this haram action is done. Now that consequence, that jaza, and that, you can say, punishment could be in dunya, or it could be in akhirah. Okay, what do I mean by that? There are many ahadith that speaks about the people who sin a lot, their rizq is decreased. So the consequence of that sin, of that haram, is seen in dunya. But sometimes we will see the uquba and the consequences in akhirah. For example, for a person who doesn't pray, we hear about all the punishments of the akhirah for the different things. So this is what haram is. When committed, there will be a consequence. طيب. And there are categories for this as well. Just like there is categories, like how I mentioned, fard and wajib, there's also categories for this as well. And the categorization is for the exact same reason I mentioned before. Okay? There's haram, there's makruh tahrimi, and there's makruh tanzihi. Now, what's the difference between haram and makruh tahrimi? Again, haram is anything that has been proven by a qat'i dalil. Haram is anything that has been proven by those three types of dalils I mentioned: Quran, hadith mutawatir, hadith mashhur. Makruh tahrimi is anything that has been proven by a dhanni dalil, like how I mentioned. This is the difference. And why have they made this classification and categorization? Because of how people look at it. And if someone denies one, they will be considered out of the fold of Islam, and if someone denies the other, they will not be considered out of the fold of Islam. Okay? So again, these categorizations are solely for the purpose of explaining a person's condition and state when he denies something in Islam. Understand? Okay, so now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, وَنَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ تِبْيَانًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ, that we have revealed the Quran to you تِبْيَانًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ, as an explanation, an illustration for everything. Meaning everything is very clear. The Quran was revealed to you for this, as a tibyan, as an explanation. So now Imam Mujahid ibn Jabr, he's one of the most famous mufassirin from the tabi'een. He says, what does this ayah mean? He says, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ أُمِرُوا بِهِ وَنُهُوا عَنْهُ, meaning every single thing has been made evident and explained in terms of what? Everything. We have been commanded to do things, and we have also been forbidden to do things in the Quran. So these commands are very clear from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and these prohibitions are also very clear from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. So now, getting into some misconceptions. Some people say, and we hear this a lot, especially when they see a haram ingredient inside different foods they like, they say, oh, everything is haram. They get upset. You hear it all the time. When a candy has some gelatin, or when this type of cheese has this type of enzyme or whatever it is, they make a very general statement and say, oh man, everything is haram. But this is a very, very foolish statement because they forget all the other things that have made halal for them. They don't look at all the things that have been made halal for them, yet they look at that one thing that has been made haram for them. This shows the ingratitude of the human being. Very ungrateful. We ignore all the good, but we look at that one negative per se. We should not do this. And one thing to remember is that everything, there's a qaida in fiqh, and this qaida is taken from many ahadith. The qaida is al-aslu fil ashya'i ibahatun. Okay? That everything is halal until proven otherwise. Okay, everything is halal until proven otherwise. What does that mean? Everything is halal by default. Everything we see around us is halal by default, unless there is a text coming and explaining or saying that no, this is not haram. So this is the general qaida and rule. Everything is halal by default unless there's an external text that comes and says otherwise. It's like that statement in the court of law, where you're innocent until proven guilty. It's the same thing, right? You cannot say a person's guilty until there is actual evidence saying and showing that he is guilty. So it's the same thing. Everything's halal until evidence comes and shows that this aspect or this thing is not halal. So now, one thing to remember, okay? This qa'idah I just mentioned to you, that everything is halal until proven otherwise, this is not included in acts of worship. Okay? This is not included in acts of ibadat. What does that mean? Because in acts of ibadat, everything has already been explained. So for us to come and say that this is something halal, when it's already been explained, this is incorrect. So in acts of ibadat, what are we going to do? We're going to say everything is haram until proven otherwise by the text, by the Quran, Sunnah, or the explanation of the ulama. Does that make sense? For example, I can't sit here and say clapping my hands is an act of ibadah. I can't do that because Sharia has already explained what an act of ibadah is. So in acts of ibadat, it's looked at the opposite. Everything is haram until proven otherwise. This is also when it comes to meat, consumption of meat, that all meat is haram until proven otherwise. Okay? All meat is haram unless some text comes and says that this type of meat is halal. Okay? So this qa'idah of everything is halal until proven otherwise is specific to, is general to everything except these two things: acts of worship and the consumption of meat. Okay? So now, we're going to end this off by a couple pieces of advice for all of us. There are some things, we've heard of this concept of haram police. Have you guys heard of this concept? Haram police? Where they go around and in a very negative manner with no wisdom, they say, brother, this is haram. Brother, this is shirk. Brother, this is bid'ah. In a very rough tone, without any hikmah. This is not from the sunnah. This is not from the sunnah to go and criticize and ridicule people, especially if those people aren't even praying in the first place. Especially if those people, they are not as close to Islam as we are. I'll give you guys some examples. And these are some very sad examples I've seen. I was once at a masjid, and this one brother, he had tattoos all over his body. Okay, he had tattoos all over his body. And he came to the masjid after a very, very long time. He came to the masjid after a very, very long time. You know, he wanted to come back. Allahu A'lam. Maybe he wanted to turn back and change his life. We don't know. Allahu A'lam. He entered the masjid. He lifted up his sleeves to make wudu. And there's a person there sitting. He comes up to him. He says, brother, you have tattoos. This is haram. What are you doing? He just starts going off on him. And this brother, can you imagine what he felt? This is his first time coming to the masjid in so long. And the first time he comes, and after a while, he's getting bashed by some old guy saying that, brother, this is haram, brother, what are you doing, brother? Do you think that person is ever going to come back to the masjid now? Or do you think that person is going to be driven further away from the masjid? Another example I'll give you guys, I've seen with my own eyes. This one brother came, walked into the masjid. He was wearing a chain. He was wearing a chain. So what he did, he walked into the masjid, he put his chain inside his collar to cover it. He tried to cover his chain. You know, he had some type of, respect for the masjid. At least he tried to cover it. Again, this is a brother who doesn't come to the masjid much. This is a brother who's not fully practicing deen. He walks into the masjid, a guy comes, brother, this is kufr. Brother, this chain is kufr. What are you doing? How can you wear this inside the masjid? Do you think that brother got turned away from the masjid, or do you think he got closer to the masjid after that? Right? There's a hikmah behind everything. We can't just go around and ridicule and criticize people on what they're doing. أَنزِلُ النَّاسَ مَنَازِلَهُمْ Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a beautiful hadith. Base your life, we should base our lives around this hadith. أَنزِلُ النَّاسَ مَنَازِلَهُمْ. Approach people according to their condition. Speak to people according to their condition. There's so much hikmah in this hadith. One example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What a man he was. There was this one occasion where this one Bedouin walked in. And I mentioned this hadith in my Jumu'ah khutbahs. This one Bedouin, he walked into the masjid. He walked into the masjid and he started urinating in the corner of the masjid. He started peeing, urinating in the corner of the masjid, in Masjid Nabawi in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? Okay, first of all these Sahaba stood up. They all stood up. They got so mad. They were going to beat this guy up. What are you doing? You're urinating inside the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, stop. He said, stop. He does not know. He's a Bedouin. He's a person who lives in the outskirts, in the deserts. He does not have these adab and akhlaq that we have. He stopped the Sahaba. He said, stop. Let him finish. Let him finish urinating. And then after that, go clean it. Throw water in that area and clean it. Then after that, the Prophet ﷺ went and approached him in a matter according to him. This is the hikmah of Rasulullah ﷺ. This is the adab of Rasulullah ﷺ. So don't be haram police, where wherever you see somebody, if they're not according in your estimation of following Islam 100%, you're not obliged to go and criticize and ridicule them in that manner and fashion. There's a way to speak to people. There's a way to give da'wah. There's a way to give advice. Look at Fir'aun. Look at how, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Fir'aun. Fir'aun was one of the most wickedest men to ever touch this earth. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Musa and Harun alayhi salatu wa salam. فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. O Musa, O Harun, speak to him, speak to Fir'aun in a very soft manner. This is Fir'aun. This is a mushrik. This is a person who used to try to compare himself to Allah, na'udhu billah. And do you think that these people who have tattoos, who are trying to come to the masjid, are these people who have these small mistakes trying to come to the masjid, are these people worse, or is Fir'aun worse? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding Musa and Harun to speak to them in a soft manner. Do you not think that we should also speak to these people in a softer manner? Right? There's a hikmah behind everything. So look, another example I'll give. Alcohol in Islam. When the hukum of alcohol when people in the time of the Prophet ﷺ were drinking alcohol, was the hurma of alcohol given right at the beginning of Islam? No, it wasn't. It was slowly and gradually made haram. It was slowly and gradually made haram. When the Prophet ﷺ began his da'wah, he didn't say, alcohol is haram. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, alcohol is haram, don't do this, haram, haram, don't do this. He did not say this. Why? Because the people at that time, this was from their habits and adat. They used to drink alcohol. So the hurma slowly and steadily came. The first hurma came, O you who believe, لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى. Don't come and pray salah while you're intoxicated. And then after that, the hurma was made general. Right? So, أنزل الناس منازلهم. Before you speak to somebody, before you give da'wah to somebody, before you criticize somebody, look at their condition, look at their hal. You don't want to say something that's going to drive them further away from Islam. Because if we do that, the sin will be on us on Yawm al-Qiyamah. The sin will be on us on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So, these were some advices I wanted to end off today's dars with. There are many, inshallah, there's going to be more lessons we're going to take in the next lesson. The next dars, we're going to complete this hadith. We're going to speak about the mushtabihat, the obscure matters, the matters that aren't clear. They're not wadih, they're not bayyin, they're not evident. We're going to speak about those, and we're also going to speak about the heart, inshallah ta'ala. And as we know, Islam gives a lot of emphasis on doing islah and rectifying the heart. And inshallah ta'ala, during the next dars, we will speak about this. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding on everything that has been heard and said. جزاكم الله خيرا وأحسن الجزاء. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.